Hello, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. It's been a little while. I'm back, have a lot to talk about. Um, just give me 1 second. I have a couple things to do behind the scenes, and I am sick, which is why my voice sounds a little weird. Honestly, I probably should be doing a live stream, but I have a lot to talk about, so I'm gonna take the risk. Um, Give me 1 second. If anybody watching the live stream can share it on social media, I would greatly appreciate it. Give me 1 second, everybody, and we're going to get started on some of the topics that we have. uh, I realize that I'm going to have to do something about this internet connection. Let me know in the chat if there's anything, if it's like lagging or anything like that. There's something I can do to fix it, but I'd like to know before I get started on the topics. So there's no lagging or anything like that, guys? Because usually this internet connection is pretty trash. All right, so I'm just gonna tweet out the. I will just tweet out a link to the live stream so that the audience on Twitter can find me. Give me 1 second. send a tweet. All right. So let's see who's in the chat before I get started. Where Pilgrim, good to see you back in the chat. Dan in the Outback one. Good to see you. David Lazarus. All right, so let's get right into the stories that we have. The first story I'm gonna talk about is oh, so Congress just approved $40 billion in weapons to be sent to Ukraine. This is on top of the billions of dollars in weapons we've already sent Ukraine since uh, this war started in February. And this is outrageous, the amount of money that we're dumping into this. Um, but I'll save that for the segment. The other topic we're going to talk about, which is in the title, Kyle Kulinski, host of Secular Talk, one of the larger left commentary shows, a self-declared anti-imperialist, uh, supports the U.S. giving billions of dollars in weapons to Ukraine. I have a clip of that to show you. There's also a clip from a speech George W. Bush gave where he basically he confused Iraq with Ukraine, and it basically admits that he's a war criminal for what he did in Iraq. That video it's there's a lot of commentary to be had around that, and also this was something that happened a little while ago, maybe over a week ago now. A journalist for Al Jazeera, Shireen Abu Akla, I believe her name was, it was shot and killed while covering the occupation forces as they were removing people from their homes in occupied territories, and she was clearly wearing a press jacket, and they shot her it clearly intentionally. She had a helmet. She had a flak jacket that had press on it, and they shot her in the through the they shot her, and if that wasn't bad enough, they disrupted her funeral in something completely fucking barbaric. And I don't think I have that video, um, but I'll try to get it by the end of the live stream. All right. So I'm going to get started on the first topic, which is the billions of dollars in weapons that's being sent to Ukraine. All right, so Congress recently just approved billions of dollars in weapons to be sent to Ukraine, and the amount of money is outstanding, especially for something that technically isn't uh, uh, our a, a war that we're in, allegedly. But honestly, I think we should reframe this discussion, because when you look at just how much support and how much we are invested in one side of this war, it's hard to say that we are actively uh, engaged, like actively in war with Russia at the moment. We spent oh, to this point we sent $54 billion to Ukraine. Ukraine's total GDP, so all the money that's made in Ukraine for a given year, I believe for like last year, 2021, was like $50 billion. The total amount that Russia spends on their entire military is about $60 billion. And since February of this year up till May, we've sent $54 billion in weapons to Ukraine. So, and when you look at what we're funding, again, it's every aspect of this war we are directly funding and facilitating. So this situation, as I mentioned earlier, I think we do need to reframe the discussion because when you try to, this is from my experience, when I try to talk to people about the situation, when you talk about this war between Ukraine and Russia, it sounds like some faraway thing that doesn't really like affect their lives. But the reality of the situation is, like I mentioned, with the amount of support and just how much we're facilitating this war. This is clearly a war between the U.S. and Russia. We are providing more support than the Ukrainian military multiple times over than what they had before. So and you look at where the money's going. It's going to tanks and missiles. It's going to fund to pay the salaries of people in the Ukrainian military. It's going to assault rifles. It's going to all different kinds of different. It's going to drones, all different kinds of aspects of funding this war and facilitating this war. And even before all of this happened, and we spent this unholy amount of money in to fund this war in Ukraine, we already had an incredible amount of influence in the country. The U.S. The State Department did a whole coup in 2014 and installed their own government. So now, again, this is to further the point that this isn't even really a proxy war. This is just a war between the U.S. and Russia, two nuclear armed countries. Before the $54 billion was even in the picture, we had a sizable influence in what was going on in Ukraine. In fact, we were actually it was one of our puppet states, Ukraine. So now we dump $54 billion towards this war. You think that comes without strings attached? No, the U.S. is calling the shots and deciding what happens in Ukraine at this point. And we're just escalating the situation because of the profits of the defense contractors. People are making a bunch of money off of this. So to me, the situation was a little. I needed more. I needed more information to make an assessment of what this war actually is. But now it's clear, especially when you see the price tag and just how much money is going into this. This is just another money-making operation for the military-industrial complex. They view this as another opportunity to sell billions of dollars of weapons, and as is usually the case, a country will be destroyed, cities will be destroyed, millions of people's lives will be ruined. But at the end of the day, they are driven by their profits and trying to maximize their profits. But so, I mean, before I was already against, knowing what I knew at the time, before I knew the scale of the grift and the money making operation in Ukraine, I was already against our involvement because the context and what I understand of what happens in every other circumstance when the U.S. gets involved in a war. We make the situation worse, um, for so that our corporations could benefit from it. But now, like I said, knowing the scale of the grift, it's hard for anybody, for me to see how anybody, on the left, anybody who considers themselves anti-war, anybody who's anti-imperialist, can be on the fence about this. This is, like I said, just another U.S. military intervention to drive the profits of the defense industry. But there's an added level of danger here, because it's not just some country that can't defend themselves, like Iraq or Afghanistan. Um, we're talking about a country that has nuclear weapons, and we are literally, like I said before, just the amount of money that uh, that we're putting into this, and the weapons that we're putting into this, and for context, this is, it's not like we're buying a bunch of pillows and blankets for Ukrainian soldiers. We're sending them weapons so that they can kill Russian soldiers. I don't understand how we can be completely paying the salaries of the Ukrainian military, giving them all their weapons, giving them all their intelligence. And that was a whole other story about how the U.S. military and the CIA is providing intelligence to Ukraine, the Ukrainian military on the ground, to target Russian generals, to assassinate Russian generals. So we're providing them all this support. I don't understand how anybody can say that we're just not at war with Russia at this point. So I just think we people need to be aware of how quickly this situation is escalating, because once they've already dumped this amount of money into Ukraine, it's not going to just stop next week. This war isn't going to stop in a month from now. This is what they do. This is a long-term investment for the weapons manufacturers. This is another one of, this is what they're hoping would be another one of their endless wars, where it just keeps going on indefinitely, similar to like Iraq or Afghanistan, and we'll occupy it, and we are kind of occupying Ukraine right now, and we'll send a bunch of money, and we'll have absolutely no objective other than continuing the money making operation. That's what this looks like. To me, this whole Ukraine situation just looks like a giant money making grift. Oh, and another point I want to make is it's so, it seems like the Biden administration is just coming up with these spectacular crises, or exacerbating these crises to the point where the government is just subsidizing his corporate donors. For example, like this with the war in Ukraine, Lockheed Martin and Boeing and all these other defense contractors and weapons manufacturers who donated millions of dollars to his campaign. Well, now it's their turn to cash in and reap the benefits of buying their politician. And so now they get this war in Ukraine and billions of dollars blank check. And that's a whole other thing. Congress basically gave Biden a blank check to give them however much weapons they want, whenever he wants. And so with Ukraine, it's the defense contractors' turn to cash in. Before, when it was COVID, it was Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson and Johnson, Big Pharma. It was their turn to cash in with these vaccines that turned around to become the most profitable drugs in history. Um, so it just seems like the all the Biden administration is doing is making life worse for regular people while letting his corporate donors run out the back door with all the money, which is, I guess, par for the course. This is typical American politics, but he's doing it at an extraordinary level with the, like I said, the giveaways to big pharma, and then now this unprecedented giveaway to the weapons manufacturing industry within the span of months. $54 billion just appeared out of nowhere, just materialized out of nowhere. All right, I'm going to go to the comment section. Um, George E says, "Glad to see you. Can't stay long, but you've been missed. I'm glad that you're able to join the live stream for a little bit." George E, hope I really am going to cut up these videos, these segments, and upload them separately, and at the very least, put timestamps on the live stream. So hopefully, when you come back, you could just get straight to the stories, George. Joel S says the reality is the military and contractors are getting that money regardless. The budget goes up and up every year. How is Russia not imperialist and trying to genocide the Ukrainian people? Um, I have spoken about this before on the show. Um, I don't. I'm not gonna sit here and justify starting a war because from the years and years and years of research that I've done on war, there is once you turn a city or a country into a war zone, it's there's no controlling what happens. It's just chaos and murdering people and just the worst uh, uh, possible like human instincts take over, and it's literally the most barbaric thing that I think can ever be done in the world. So I'm not going to justify Putin turning Ukraine into a war zone. Um, like I mentioned before, I don't think this is just like some bloodlust thing. I do think this was largely instigated and provoked by NATO. I do believe the what was happening in the Donbass region and the Ukrainian military attacking Russian speaking Ukrainians in the Donbass. I do think that also played a role in this. So whether you want to, I honestly I don't know if you can classify it whatever you want to classify it as imperialist whatever. I don't know if I would go as far as say call it a genocide because it's not like he just woke up one day and says I'm going to slaughter Ukrainian people. Um, but that's my point on that. Ashura says unapologetic Kyle bitched about being called a warmonger, and he was being criticized for his pro Ukraine reporting when the war started. Yeah, I think I've seen that too. He's been full of shit takes on. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. He's been full of shit takes on this Ukraine situation. Joel S says Russia literally occupying Ukraine and raping and pillaging, but helping Ukraine defeat the invaders is occupying them. We're occupying Ukraine. We were occupying Ukraine even before this war started in February, when the State Department did a coup and installed a puppet government in 2014, and has been using Ukraine as a puppet state ever since then. Um, so it wasn't like a flat out boots on the ground military occupation, but it was a client state, and it was like one, one of the many other uh, uh, states that the U.S. makes subservient to them around the world. And now it is a military. It's going to be. It seems like a U.S. military occupation because all of our uh, 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 military resources that are not being put into the country and are basically running the country. Like I said, we just put $54 billion in weapons into Ukraine, and it comes with a lot of support from the U.S. military, um, and whoever is in control of that money, it has a lot to say about what goes on in Ukraine. So we're running Ukraine right now. All right, so I'm going to get into the next topic. This is one that was in the title. There is going to be a lot about the Ukraine war because, like I said, I haven't been able to talk about it lately, and it's a very important topic. This one is more on the media, the online media. One of the biggest left channels has had nothing but shit takes on the situation in Ukraine, and y'all know who it is. Y'all got to know who it is. All right, so just give me 1 second. I'm gonna get that. Make sure that video is.
Now, look, I was in favor of
Oh no, actually, it has to be the George Bush one. I have to do the George Bush story first because it leads into this other one. Sorry, buddy. All right. One of the points I've been trying to make since this war in Ukraine started, especially to people who don't follow politics closely, is a lot of the pearl clutching and the crocodile tears that you're seeing from politicians and people in the media when it comes to Ukraine, it's bullshit. Um, and I can say that because the context I have from following these very same people and how they cover war in other circumstances and how they cover mass killings and other circumstances in which our government is directly responsible and we have a direct uh, uh, we have responsibility over those actions. um, I've seen how they cover those wars, and they are incredibly pro-war, and they'll do apologetics when our country is doing genocide for profit. And so, um, all of their faux outrage and fake concern about Ukraine, it needs to be seen for what it really is. It's just a way to manipulate people into going along with supporting further escalation on behalf of the U.S. and into this war. And I've talked about this on the channel before. I think I played the clip of Condoleezza Rice. She was like on Fox News, and she was feigning outrage about how dare somebody invade a sovereign country or some shit like that. She was Secretary of State under uh, 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 or she was Bush's national security advisor during the Iraq War. So, but this clip, George Bush did a speech, and he made a slip, and basically admits that he's a war criminal and invaded Iraq over a bunch of lies. And honestly, it's kind of stunning that he would just come out and publicly like kind of say this and joke about it and laugh about it. But I'll show the clip and I'll come back and break it down.
The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia.
Can you all let me know if you could hear the video I'm about to play in the chat?
The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia, and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, anyway. 75. Here's the
Okay, so there was George Bush basically laughing about invading Iraq and killing a million Iraqi civilians, and the room erupts in applause. I mean, so there's, I'm almost at a loss of words here because these same people, and so this is why. All right, throughout this entire conflict, I have to keep making it clear that yes, I do feel bad for the people in Ukraine whose lives have been turned upside down, whose cities have been turned into war zones. Yes, I feel bad for those people. I don't. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But that is a something. Feeling bad for the Ukrainian civilians is completely separate from the U.S. getting involved and sending billions of dollars worth of weapons. Um, those two things are not equal. Because if the U.S. gets involved in Ukraine and all these billions of dollars in weapons come, it's not because, oh, the these poor Ukrainian civilians need our help and we're going to go and rescue them and save the day. We would only be involved to further the agenda of the imperialists and the defense contractors. That would be the only way we're involved in Ukraine. So, understanding that, you have these people coming out here, and you know damn well he knows what he did when he was president. He knows that he invaded a country, he invaded Iraq, with completely fabricated evidence and lied to the UN, lied to the public, lied to the media, lied to anybody, and manufactured consent for a war that killed a million people. He knows he did that. He knows we're still in. He knows Iraq is still uh, in shambles from what he did. He knows that we also occupied Afghanistan. Um, his administration, and they that was part of the lessons learned interviews in the Afghanistan papers. So it was people from his administration on the record admitting, yeah, we have no idea what we're doing. We're massacring civilians, and we're covering it up, and we're dumping a bunch of money into Afghanistan with absolutely nothing to show for it. So he knows that he oversaw death and destruction and invading sovereign borders and all the things, and he did it his entire administration, and he didn't give a fuck about it, right? So now he's on a speaking tour, and he is going to come out here and act like, oh wow, Putin invaded Ukraine, and this is such an affront to humanity that we need to send $54 billion. So if Putin invading Ukraine is such an affront that it requires the U.S. to be fully invested on the other side of a nuclear a war with a nuclear armed country. So what should have been the response when you did the same thing, when you illegally invaded a country? So like there is absolutely no principle behind any of this hysteria to uh, 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 get involved militarily in Ukraine. It is just the same people who are tools of the military-industrial complex, seeing this as their next shiny object, as their next endless war, and they're pouncing on it. That's why Ukraine is on the TV all the time. That's why you are hearing people pearl clutching about Russia occupying Ukraine, but you hear there isn't a fucking peep about Israel occupying Palestine. You don't hear a peep about the U.S. occupying Syria so that we could steal their oil. We're occupying their oil fields. You don't hear anything about those other occupations, right? Because, like I said, in order for to maximize profit for the military industrial complex, they have to gin up this and manufacture consent for us to be further involved in Ukraine. So that's the only reason why you're seeing all this full outrage about it. And again, I want to make it clear that conversations about these disgusting people who want to manipulate the public into war is completely different from regular people having a genuine human reaction to seeing like this kind of suffering. So I think that was a telling clip by George W. Bush, war criminal extraordinaire, and out here pretending to care about sovereignty and pretending to care about respecting borders, as if he didn't give a fuck when he was president of the United States.
Now, look, I was in favor of.
All right, so Jesus Christ, my fucking throat is killing me. All right, so I'm going to get into this next topic. All right, so needless to say, I've been disappointed by how bad online left media, progressive media has been at covering what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, you take your pick of any of the old online commentators shows. I mean, full of shit takes. Rational National, TYT, of course, Sam Cedar, uh, Kyle Kulinski, also full of shit takes. But I have a clip from Kyle where he talks about basically supporting giving weapons to Ukraine. And for the life of me, I can't think of a legitimate reason why anybody. I understand if you aren't as um, up to date and informed on our interventions around the world and the military industrial complex and how it works and how the arms industry works. If you didn't have all of that relevant context, I understand how you can think giving weapons to Ukraine is a good idea. But I don't know how somebody who talks about corruption in politics in the military industrial complex and all of our endless interventions around the world and arming terrorists and extremists to be our foot soldiers in these different countries. Somebody who talks about this on a regular basis is presented with a new a new war, a new intervention, and basically is in lockstep with what the military industrial complex wants, almost exactly what they want. Um, Actually, give me 1 second. So I have the clip of Kyle admitting that he supports uh, uh, giving weapons to Ukraine. Now, for some context, this I heard this. This was like buried in a different video that he did. This was in the video on his channel about the baby formula shortage. And like towards the end of the video, he mentions the billions of dollars being sent to Ukraine, and so I'll play the clip and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Now, look, I was in favor of. Now, look, I was in favor of arming Ukraine in the wake of Russia invading. They have every right to defend themselves, and so I understand giving them weapons. But I did have a pretty strong caveat attached to that, which is you cannot arm the Azov battalion, who are card-carrying neo-Nazis and who are part of the Ukrainian National Guard. Well, we've sent how many rounds of weapons to Ukraine now? 4? 5? We just sent another $40 billion. By the way, there are no addendums or attachments that say, hey, these weapons or this money can't go to the Azov battalion. They have no idea where this money's going.
All right, so in that short clip, Kyle's doing that his famous talking out of both sides of his mouth routine, where he says, "Oh yes, I support giving the weapons to Ukraine," because he has to sound like so. He has to come across as reasonable to his people in his shit-lib circle. But then he adds the caveat of oh, you know, but we just can't give it to the Nazis though. And I'll get to that in a minute. But the first point I want to address is this conflation of Ukraine and Ukrainian citizens have a right to defend themselves, and the U.S. getting involved and dumping tens of billions of dollars worth of weapons into Ukraine. Those two things are not like inextricably linked. Like you can have one without the other. Yes, I'm not. I couldn't tell the Ukrainian citizens if they wanted to pick up guns and defend themselves against Russian soldiers walking, occupying their streets. I couldn't tell them not to do that. But supporting the U.S. Getting militarily involved in a war, getting directly involved in a war against a nuclear armed country, that's a completely different thing. And the way that people are acting like those are exactly the same is very dangerous. Because, like I mentioned earlier in that segment I did on George Bush, the U.S. the only way we get involved is if to benefit the profits of the defense contractors and the weapons manufacturers. That's the only way we get. So whether or not Ukrainians have the right to defend themselves is completely irrelevant, because that's not what's motivating the decision making here in the U.S. What's motivating the decision making is the defense industry, who donates millions of dollars to politicians, see this as a giant opportunity for them to make a bunch of fucking money, and through this money laundering scheme, which is the arms industry, and so that's exactly what they're doing. So for you to come out and say, yes, I support doing exactly what the military industrial complex wants to do because the Ukrainians have a right to defend themselves, that's completely irrelevant, because, like I said, they're advancing their own agenda. And let's just break this down a little bit more. Let's do this step by step. Again, this is Kulinski, somebody who covers U.S. military interventions regularly on his show, covers the military-industrial complex regularly on the show, and the entire genocide for profit scheme that they have going on. And he's familiar with the dirty wars and the how we ravaged Latin America and the coups and all those things. Can somebody point me one time in history where the U.S. arming any type of group in a conflict has turned out for the better? Name me one time. Because as history shows it, we arm extremists and people who we can trust to do our bidding and the bidding of our corporations in those countries. That's usually who we arm. And oftentimes it's head choppers and people and dictators. If you look at some of the more recent examples, look at who we arm in Syria, fucking head choppers and jihadists, Al-Qaeda and ISIS. That's what we're arming in Syria. Literal terrorists, that's what we're arming in Syria. Yemen, the same thing. We're arming Al-Qaeda in Yemen, using them as ground soldiers in Yemen. So, and these are just right off the top of my head. We talk about when we armed the Batistas in Cuba, or the any time in history you want to look at. When have we ever given weapons to a side in a conflict and everything just went rosy after that? That has never fucking happened. So why do you think the situation in Ukraine is so extra and special that you think us just dumping billions of dollars worth of weapons is going to make the situation better? And all that, and or we're just not doing it to advance our own imperialist agenda in the country, as we always do when we arm certain groups. So there's that part of it. When we arm people, it's to advance imperialism. And it's usually the most extreme people, which brings me to this caveat that he wants to add to his support to giving to the caveat he wants to add to us engaging in this war with this nuclear country in Ukraine, which is that, I support giving billions of dollars in weapons to Ukraine only if we make sure we don't give it to the Nazis. Well, like I said, this is his famous double speak, talking out of both sides of his mouth, because you can't have it both ways. If you're gonna so if the U.S. is gonna give weapons to Ukraine, they're gonna end up Nazis are gonna end up getting them. They're gonna get their hands on them because the Azov battalion and these other Nazis factions, they have a lot of sway in the government and in the military. And in the military, they're the most experienced fighters in the Ukrainian military. So they're the ones calling the shots in the Ukrainian military. So there is no world where we give them $54 billion, and it doesn't end up in the hand of neo Nazis. And when you put in the context of what I mentioned before on how we like to arm the rebels, the extremists, the most extremist factions that we could find in the country, if history were to repeat itself, we would go as we actually have made an alliance with the neo Nazis in Ukraine. We've had an alliance with them since 2014. So again, there is no circumstance where we give billions of dollars of weapons to Ukraine and it doesn't end up going to the neo Nazis. So knowing that, why don't you just come out and say, I'm against giving weapons to Ukraine? So this is just a weird take. Not even to mention the fact that we're escalating with a nuclear armed country into a possible nuclear war. And again, somebody who claims to be anti-war and against nuclear proliferation and the use of nuclear weapons, for you to just casually support us being disinvolved in a war with Russia, I don't know how you rationalize that. So, Shit Take by Kyle Kulinski. Yeah, he's been full of shit takes. It wasn't just this. He also supports the sanctions. Well, he says, and the same thing with the sanctions, speaking out of both sides of his mouth. Oh, I support sanctions on Russia, but I don't support sanctions that hurt civilians. When has there ever been a time where the U.S. put sanctions on the country and they didn't hurt civilians? That's never fucking happened. So you just have this fantasy in your head about this tactic, and you think that, oh, I'm going the U.S. is on a full tear to implement the unprecedented sanctions and economic warfare on Russia. Okay, well, I don't support the sanctions that hurt civilians, but I support sanctions on the oligarchs, whatever the fuck that means. Oh, I don't support giving weapons to Nazis, but let's give billions of dollars to the Ukrainian military. What you like those? How do you rationalizing this? How are you working this out in your head? And then the other point I want to make is, so you want to give billions of dollars in weapons to Ukraine, right? Who do you think is going to facilitate the transfer of those weapons? Do you think it's going to be some flaming lefty, principled lefty, who's going to give this to these magical Ukrainian freedom fighters and to save the day? You think that's what's going to happen? Or do you think that the people who have profited from the endless wars and engaged in the military-industrial complex, people who've come straight from the weapons manufacturers, like the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Anthony Blinken, who was also ran a defense contracting firm. They're the ones who are gonna be handing out the weapons, and they're the ones in control of these deals. So you know what they do when they have decision making power like that. They're going to do what's best for them and what's best for their friends in the industry. So again, it's weird to me that he just wants to like he thinks like these are just some benevolent people working on this Ukraine situation. This is I don't know how much sense this makes, but this is like something that I was thinking about because these people like Kyle Kulinski and these other people, these libs, these shit libs, it's like they live in this fantasy world, and like every day you wake up, the slate is wiped clean, and everybody gets a clean slate, and it's a start over, and there is no relevant context. What you did before, it has no bearing on your decision making process today. It's a completely new day. In this instance of Ukraine, Kyle Kulinski really is coming out here on his show and making the case that Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin and Joe Biden, some of the most disgusting war profiteers in our history, we can trust them to just hand out billions of dollars of weapons in Ukraine because the Ukrainian people have a right to defend themselves. So therefore, these people who have, like I said, a history of war profiteer. Have you all looked at just how much of a money pit like the Iraq War and Afghanistan wars, and how it was just a scam? As Julian Assange put it, it was a money laundering operation for the defense contractors. It was just one big grift. Like that's why I call it genocide for profit. So these people who regularly engage in genocide for profit. Lloyd Austin was literally on the board of Raytheon when he was voted in to be Secretary of Defense. You really think these people are going to come in here and make a like in good faith? They're going to be good faith arbiters about the situation in Ukraine, and their only involvement is going to be to give weapons to the good guys in Ukraine so they could beat the bad guys in Russia. That's a very childish way of looking at the world. But to the point I was making about like the whole wiping the slate clean thing, like another example of that would be like with these elected progressives. Like it doesn't matter how much context you have about what they are and what these brand of politicians actually are and what they're actually going to do. It doesn't matter how much times they refused to force a vote on Medicare for all. They voted for the CARES Act. They didn't show up to the March for Medicare for all. Just a mouthpiece with Joe Biden and the Democratic establishment. No matter how many times they show you who they are, like I said, they wake up the next day and they be like, "It's new slate, everybody." Yeah, I know you've shown me who you are enough times that I should be like, I'm done giving you the benefit of the doubt. But like I said, it's a new slate, new day, new slate. And yeah, you didn't show up to the March for Medicare for All. Yeah, you refused to force a vote on it. And yeah, Bernie was writing major legislation for Joe Biden, and he refused to put Medicare for All on any of it. But did you see Nina Turner just put out an ad where she said Medicare for All? Yo, these progressives, they're coming and they're really gonna save the day. Like it's weird. Like I don't know if you can call it amnesia, the selective amnesia, but it's ridiculous. You have to be smarter than to actually think any involvement from the U.S. is in good faith, and anything other than advancing imperialist goals. That's literally the all of our involvement in Ukraine is. And if you're going to support the goals of the military industrial complex, because what they want is a free for all and sending weapons to Ukraine. And if you support that, okay, so how are you really going to call yourself anti-imperialist if you're going along with the imperialist agenda? That doesn't really make any sense to me. Oh my God, my voice is. Assure says Kyle is going pro-war because his rich mainstream media corrupt girlfriend who took PAC money and never. I mean, it is worth remembering that he is a shit lib. He's another out of touch shit lib. Kyle Kulinski, I'm pretty sure, is a millionaire. Cristobal is a multi millionaire. Her husband's like a hedge fund, some shit, hedge fund owner or some shit. So they are a bunch of millionaires, and they talk to a bunch of other elitist people, libs in their circles, also millionaires, and that does affect their content. It really does. And there's lack of urgency on certain issues. All right, y'all. I really can't talk anymore. If you can help, if you can contribute to the show, I would greatly appreciate it. The links are in the description box. The links are in. There's a link to Cash App in the live chat. Thank you all so much. Greatly appreciate it. I will be. You will see me again tomorrow, and my battery is dying, so I definitely have to get off this. Thank you all so much. I will see you all again. Oh, and I didn't get to the Shireen Abu Akla story, but I didn't have the video on my computer. But I'll try to do that tomorrow. So I'll see y'all. Thank you all for showing up to the live stream.